Okay, it looks like everybody has found the lizard. I guess this one was too easy for you guys. I will bring a hard one next time. Did anybody not find the lizard? It's right here if you didn't spot it. Face down on the right-hand trunk. Okay. So, oh, somebody circled the lizard. Okay, there we go. All right, so on Friday this week, I'm going to post some new assignments, a review quiz, and a review short answer. So what makes review quizzes and review short answers different from regular quizzes and regular short answers? These are both going to be cumulative, so it can be any of the material that we've talked about through the end of the lecture on Thursday. Otherwise, they're still open note. They generally are, especially the quizzes, they're generally a little bit longer than a regular quiz, but it's the same format as a regular quiz, and you still have a week to get it done. I've been working on catching up with the grading. I know I am so dreadfully behind. I was reading people's postings about an experience you guys had with a bird. Man, there were some really good stories in there. I really enjoyed reading all of those. So just wanted to mention that because I know that you get a grade, it's online, it's not like you're going to go looking for a comment if you got a good grade. So I just wanted to, give you guys general, those were pretty good this semester. Last time, I know it was a week ago, somebody asked me about mange in birds. We generally use that term to describe severe mite infestations. So it's not a separate disease, it's just a general term for really bad mite infestations in birds. Just like mange in animals is usually just mammals is usually just a really severe external parasite infection. And yeah, people can get mange too. So, yep. Parasites, man, we all get them. Okay, so in case you don't remember from last Tuesday, sorry about having to cancel class on Thursday. I just had something come up at the last minute that I absolutely had to deal with. So last Tuesday, we were talking about finches and canaries. And when we wrapped up, we were kind of halfway through that discussion. So we're just going to pick up where we left off. And I'm going to talk a little bit about caging. So when we talk about finches and canaries, these are flying birds. They are not climbing birds. So the parrots, things including parakeets, cockatiels, the big parrots, they climb a lot. So they'll use their beak and their feet and they'll climb up the cage. Finches and canaries don't do that. They fly. So small birds need a cage we call a flight cage. Flight cage just means big enough for them to fly. The only way they're going to get physical exercise is by flying. Yes, that first one is kind of a standard one that you buy at a pet store. So That's actually not the smallest size that pet stores tend to sell. I would call that a cage that would be good for when a bird is sick, or if you need to isolate them, or if you're transporting them. So more of a temporary type caging. Bigger is obviously better. I can see a lot of you guys in the chat are really agreeing with me. So this cage on the right, this is much better for small birds. Now, this is not going to be cheap. This is going to be a relatively expensive enclosure to purchase. But as you can see, it is tall enough for a person to walk in. There's a door on this end, so a person can walk in and clean the cage from the inside. Larger cages provide more physical stimulus and also more mental stimulus. There's more spaces for the birds to bop around. I like the different kinds of perches that are in this big cage. They're not just the straight sticks. There are a few of those, but you see these bigger branches around. I think those are very good for these small birds. There's still plenty of flight space. The bird can fly from one end of the cage all the way to the other end of the cage, but also up and down. Generally speaking, cages need to be about 24 inches wide in order for the bird to get some flight. Obviously, we'd prefer bigger. When you look at the bars of a cage, for small birds, it does not matter if the bars are horizontal or vertical. The spacing between the bars needs to be less than about ½ an inch. So rather than give you numbers for each of these birds, I'm going to give you the rule of thumb. And the rule of thumb is that a bird's head should not be able to fit between the bars of a cage. So that's your basic rule for any size bird. Because if your bird's head can fit through, there's always the chance that they'll get their head through and they'll twist around somehow and get it caught, get injured, or if it's very wide, they might be able to fit their whole body through. Cages should not be wood. Metal is much better than wood. Wood is just too hard to keep clean. Water can soak in, which means that the wood can get moldy. It can start growing bacteria and all kinds of stuff like that. So wood is not a good option. The metal can be what's called galvanized metal if it is electroplated. Oh, so these are big fancy words. What do these big fancy words mean? Electroplated means that the color of the bars is put on using electricity. And galvanized is just a specific type of metal that tends not to rust as fast. Okay, why do birds have bars as opposed to glass? Laura, that's a good point. Air circulation is important, but also these birds are flying. If they're flying, they can hit a window. You don't want them to hit the glass of the cage. You're not dumb, you just didn't think about that. I think about it because I teach this class, but that's
like a common joke, like birds running into glass. How did I not think of that? Stupid reptile brain.
Yeah. Yep. If you don't keep birds, you don't tend to think about that stuff. Laura's exactly right. A lot of people don't think about how to keep birds in captivity. Unless you've kept them in the past, you don't think about these things. And a lot of people, let's be honest, a lot of people who get birds don't think about how to keep them. All right. Small songbirds, they also sometimes sell cage with wire that's coated in plastic. Plastic is not great. With the small songbirds, it's less of a risk than something like a parakeet or one of the bigger parrots. Small songbirds don't tend to chew very much, so they're not likely to chew on the wires and get pieces of plastic off. But if there is damage to plastic coating on wires, there's a risk that the metal supports within the plastic will rust. And if the bird is chewing on the wires, there's a risk they could swallow pieces, which would be bad. So yes, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, I was wondering whether the metal of the wires in the cages that are covered in plastic is different from the wires where the wire is exposed.
It probably is. It's probably a cheaper material, because if it's covered in plastic, theoretically, it's less likely to rust as long as the plastic is intact. And metal that rusts is cheaper than metal that doesn't rust. When I'm talking about wires, I'm talking about the bars on the outside of the cage. The wires are there to keep the bird in. And now you can, go reptile brain. Okay. If the cage is not like this wonderful aviary here that's big enough to walk in, it should be roughly eye level with people, not on the floor. So a cage like this little one here, if it's on the floor, then the birds have to deal with people walking past all the time. And when they're stressed or startled, they tend to go up or sideways. And having a wire top like this one, the birds are more likely to hit it than if they can actually see a physical barrier like a ceiling, which is solid. So higher up is a little bit better. Anytime these small songbirds are trapped on the ground, and by trapped, I just mean they can't get further up, that's going to increase their stress level. If you have not kept birds, birds are messy. They are very messy. I don't have a lot of reptile handling experience, but you don't have to clean their cages near as often as you do for birds. With birds, the food and water dishes need to be removable. So if you look on this cage on the left, it's got this, I guess that's probably a food container kind of sticking out from the side. That's not ideal, because you have to take that off and close the door. Oh, reptiles fling their food around. I can imagine some lizards do that.
I worked with he was about a 3 or 4 month old tegu. He was a black and white tegu, and he took a pinky mouse and exploded it and flung it all around his enclosure, and there was blood everywhere. And I've seen like leopard geckos and them do it, but only with, I mean, those are bugs, so it's not as bad. But and snakes will do it too, but not nearly as bad. But yeah. Reptiles can get messy, but not nearly as messy, because birds kind of just drop their food. But
Oh, some of them fling it.
The mouse was dead. The mouse was long dead. But yeah, I just thought that was like, yeah, they definitely do fling their food.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've got that birds are messy. So their food and water dishes, it needs to be easy to remove them from the enclosure. And they must be easy to clean. So what I like to do is have multiple sets of dishes. I do this with our cats. We have multiple sets of water bowls, multiple sets of food bowls. And that way we can remove a dirty bowl, throw it in the dishwasher, and replace it with something clean. If you can find small bowls and water dishes for your birds that can go in the dishwasher, great, fantastic. Makes it easy to clean their dishes. If you don't have a dishwasher, soap and water. Yes, you should have, depending on the rule of thumb
'Cause
for,
that's what we said, like, as like at our store, like we say, oh, like we have 5 inches, we shouldn't have just one water and one food bowl.
you're,
And they're
abs-
just, there, it's not, no, like, you know, one bird could drink it all.
you're absolutely right. They can also bully each other and keep the others away from food and water.
Oh, yeah.
Figuring out the right number of food and water bowls can be a little bit tricky in a large mixed flock or a large flock of finches. You need multiples of each of food bowls and multiple water bowls, but exactly how many, if you've got a cage like this, you could have 20 finches in there. You can't have 21 food bowls. So you've just kind of got to, you know, watch them and make sure that everybody gets a chance at food. It's definitely more than 1 or 2. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Washing them, like I said, you can throw them in the dishwasher, but if you're washing by hand, I hate to brand name drop, but Dawn. They advertise that that their product is used for oiled wildlife, and it is. It is the recommended brand by the Oiled Wildlife. Oiled Wildlife. Oh, WCN, Oiled Wildlife something network, which is Care Network. Okay, thank you. That's good. It is like the group that responds to oiled wildlife spills. So when you hear about a major oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, in South Africa, you know, pretty much anywhere in the world, this is the group that responds. And they have training classes for wildlife rehabbers. And I've taken their training class and Dawn, because it's the same stuff anywhere around the world. It's very commonly available. And because it's the same formula, you don't have to go in and look at the labels and go, okay, does this brand of detergent have anything that's harmful to birds? So Dawn unscented is the best stuff. You can also use dilute vinegar. And whatever you use to clean your dishes should be set aside specifically for this job. So if you use a scrub brush or a sponge or something, I'm not a big fan of using sponges on pet enclosures, but whatever you use, it should be set aside specifically for this job. You shouldn't go back and forth with your dishes and cleaning the bird dishes. If the bird's been ill, everything should be cleaned with dilute vinegar or 10% bleach or something like chlorhexidine, kind of the stuff that's used in vet offices.
Vivex is also a good idea.
What was that again?
Well, it's a Vivex.
Vivex? Is that a brand name?
I believe so.
Okay, that might be chlorhexidine.
Yeah, I think it is, but I'm not, I'll have to double check.
Yep. So having multiple sets of dishes makes it so easy to swap them out. These dishes should be replaced at least once a day, depending on your bird, how messy your bird is, probably twice a day. And if the bird takes baths in the water dish, yeah, well, anytime you see that it's dirty, it should be replaced. Clean water at all times. All right. So what about the bottom of the cage? That's where all the feces ends up, right? Well, no, it ends up on the perches and in the food bowl and in the water bowl, but a lot of it does go to the bottom of the cage. So I'm a fan of using newspaper. I know people don't get newspapers very often, but if you've got a neighbor who's older and gets the paper delivered, you can get their papers after the fact. You can also buy newsprint, which is basically the type of paper, newspaper that's not colored. It's cheaper than buying something designed for a bird cage. What I like to do is to take a stack of newspapers and cut them so that they fit at the bottom of the cage. Something like this aviary, you may need a couple of sheets.
I just say like also there is some like, I want to say it's pelleted bedding and it's bird safe. You can also use that too, right?
Is it a loose bedding?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't like using things like loose material bedding with birds because they're very likely to swallow pieces of it.
yeah.
So that's why I like.
I don't like it, and it ends up in their food a lot of the time too.
Yep. That's why I like using sheets of paper.
Yeah,
So you cut this stack so that all the sheets are the same size to fit in the cage nice and easy. And you put the whole stack in the bottom of the cage. And every day you go in and you take the top sheet off. Again, if your bird's taking a lot of baths, this might not work so well because they can soak the whole stack. But if the birds are not obsessed with bathing, you can just take off the top one and you don't have to bring in a new piece of paper. It's a much faster way of doing the daily cleaning. The cage itself is going to need regular cleaning. Same kind of rules that apply to cleaning the dishes. Soap and water, dedicated cleaning implements, brushes or sponges. Rinse it well, let it dry. The question is, how often should you clean the cage? I can give you a general standard. Smaller birds at least once a month. If you have a lot of birds, if your birds are particularly messy, if they're larger, then we're looking at once a week. If you have a slide out tray, like in the bottom of this cage here, the tray should be taken out of the cage and cleaned weekly, regardless of how often you clean the rest of the cage. Now, what does this mean? It means that you either need to let your birds fly free in the house, which I strongly support. I think that this is the best way to keep pet birds, is to allow them out sometimes. or you need a secondary cage to hold the birds while you're cleaning their primary cage. That might be a use for this little itty bitty guy here. Okay. Branches like these can be harder to clean regularly. If you live near a woods, or if you know the trees in your yard haven't been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides, bringing in fresh branches is always a good way to go, replacing them with new ones. All right, when we talk about these small songbirds, most people think of them as cage birds. They live in a cage, they sing, they're pretty, that's kind of it. These small songbirds can stress pretty easily. And if they're not used to being handled, handling them or taking them to the vet is a source of stress. So ideally, you will get them used to your hands. And you have to go slowly. So you can get them used to your hands coming in and replacing the food and water bowls. Touching the outside of the cage, holding your hand flat against the outside of the cage, these kinds of things. When the birds don't freak out when you do that, then you can start putting food on the palm of your hand and trying to get them to land on your palm. Once they're eating off of your palm, then you slowly start to touch them, touch their back, try and see if they would like the back of their neck scratched, that kind of stuff. And the more comfortable they are with you, the better. Ideally, you would also have some friends who would be very patient and would follow your directions that can also start to feed the birds out of the palm of their hand and that sort of stuff. So they're used to hands being a source of good things and not bad things. Generally speaking, if you allow them to perch, let them determine how long they're on your hand. It also helps to have a dedicated carrying cage or container that the bird is comfortable with. So if you have to take them to the vet, you've got something small enough to carry them in and that they are used to. So I used to have a little, literally it was about this big, little fabric container. It looked like a miniature cat crate, except it was fabric. And the ends zipped open. And I would use that if I needed to carry when I had birds. It was a good size for the birds that I had, and I was able to take them to the vet. The birds that I had included zebra finches. I had 2 zebra finches, and I had a canary. So I didn't have a lot of birds. One of the zebra finches and the canary were both secondhand birds that were given to me by someone who really could not take care of them, and they were in pretty bad shape when I got them. Hence, having to go to the vet. Okay, and yes, you can use a clicker. You can use a clicker to train birds just like you train dogs. I know you guys take dog training classes. Same concepts work with birds. Clicks and treats. Okay, but what happens if your bird is not hand-tamed and you have to catch it? Maybe it's new, maybe it's not hand-tamed, maybe like when I got the canary, it had to go to the vet, it was that sick. I didn't have time to hand train it. So how do you catch a bird? me see if I can, I'm not sure why I don't see myself. There we go. All right. If I can get this set up. Okay, so here we have a bird. How do we catch this bird? How do we keep it from flitting away?
Put a towel over it.
Oh, Laura, you know the secret. This is my favorite tool for
You
handling
have to do it
birds.
all the time.
This is a surgical towel. I like surgical towels. They have a flat surface, so they don't get, you don't have to worry so much about nails getting caught in it. They also go right in the washing machine. So what do? Drop the towel on top of the bird. It's going to hold still for a second and give you a chance to grab hold of the bird. You can also use a very large aquarium net if the bird's flying free around the room, for example. I don't really like that as much as the towel method because you're more likely to hurt them. Generally speaking, if your bird's not expecting to be caught, you can drop a towel on it pretty easily. If it's not used to being caught and it gets away from you, they almost always try the same trick to avoid getting caught. If they've gotten away from you, they tend to go the same way to try and get away from you again. So you can anticipate it and cut them off. Now, when you're restraining a small bird, we're going to talk about several different ways. I'm going to show you pictures of several different ways. But one of the things to be aware of is birds do not have a diaphragm. We have a diaphragm across our abdomen, which pulls down to help us breathe. Birds have to breathe by expanding their chest. They cannot, if you're holding them too tight, they won't be able to breathe. So you need to hold them gently. And I'm going to now go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, what's in the tank? Well, right now, it's mostly aquarium plants. I've got a couple of fish in there. I'm cycling the tank. I'm going to have freshwater shrimp, but I've got to cycle it for about 6 months before that. It is those are Japanese rice fish. So that's a very small species of fish that does well in a tank that small. Okay. Go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so these are your 3 basic small bird restraint techniques. So you can see this is a canary, thumb around one side, fingers gently around the other side. It's a nice basic hold. This bird's obviously used to being held. He's not freaking out. But this is one you have to be aware that they are of the way they breathe to make sure that you don't suffocate them. On the right, we have a wild bird. This is a junco. Juncos, this bird was captured for banding. You can see a band around its leg there. So it's a scientific experiment. And you can see they're holding the legs between their first finger and their thumb, and they're letting the bird sit on their second finger. So this is a different way to hold the bird. If the bird is freaking out and flapping its wings, you probably want to go back to putting your fingers around the body. But if the bird is calm, you can do this, and it allows you to not have to worry about the potential for suffocation. The third hold, this is a bird bander's hold. You can see the first finger is on one side of the neck. The second finger is on the other side of the neck. And the bird's just kind of gently cupped in the palm of the hand. So this thumb is keeping this wing from being able to flap around, and you've got some fingers on this side that are probably doing the same thing on that side. So your ring finger and the pinky finger are keeping the bird from flapping around, but you're not putting in, there's no risk of putting pressure across the chest and suffocating the bird. You've got to be gentle around the sides of the neck, but it's another really good hold. So all of these are ways that you would hold the bird for a veterinary exam or for nail trimming. And you can see this guy has been banded. The metal bands, we'll talk about bird banding later. The metal bands are a permanent identification for that bird. The plastic ones are designed so that you can spot the bird in the wild and identify that just by the order of these colors. So this bird would be black, white, blue left, red right. That bird is cute. Okay, well, they're all cute. What do you want me to say again, Laura, about how what we would call this bird if we spotted it in the field? Yeah, so we would call it black, white, blue, left, because that's its left leg, and then red, right, because that's the right leg. It's just the order of colors and which leg they're on. Okay. One of the reasons people like caged birds is because they sing. Now, I have had a horrible time getting sound to come over hang on a second. Getting sound to come over Zoom from YouTube. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to post a YouTube link into the chat. And I'm going to ask you guys to take a minute or two, go to the YouTube channel and listen to the canary sing, and then come back to our class. Well, sounds like you guys are coming back. So hope you enjoyed the little canary song. That's the primary reason people like to keep canaries, is because of the singing. So why do birds sing? There are a couple of reasons. Yep, you're right there, Laura. So they can be singing for territoriality. Not so much so predators know they're there. Hey, you guys have some good comments in here. Generally speaking, you don't want the predators to know you're there. If they don't know you're there, there's no chance they're going to come and eat you. So territoriality is basically saying, this is my territory. If you come in here, I'm going to fight you and I'm going to kick your ass. Ah, I see what you're thinking about, Laura. We're going to come back to that. It's not so much singing, but we're going to come back to that. Attracting mates, that's the big one. Singing says, I'm sexy. Don't you want me to father your children? Come breed with me. We can also have communication with others in the flock. These generally are different sounds than what you get for territorial or mate attracting. And it can also be, I mentioned lonely in my little window there. And, you know, I'm missing the flock. I'd like to know where the rest of the flock is. I'm going to call, I'm going to make sound to try and communicate with them. Birds do have distinct sounds they make when there are predators around. If they are a flocking bird, a bird that tends to form flocks, especially away from the breeding season during the winters, birds will make specific calls to let other members of their flock know that there's a predator. This can attract other members of their flock to come and do what's called mobbing behavior, where the little birds dive bomb the predator and try and drive it away. So you'll often hear these sounds, birders call it pishing, and very often the sound that says there's a predator around is psh, 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 psh. That's what small songbirds tend to do. Laura, you have a question?
So what if you have two birds, right? Or no, let's say you have four. You have one that bullies another. So you start saying, hey, I'm gonna separate you. Why would you hear that bird that's separated call back, like do that song saying like, hey, like I'm lonely, or would it? It's like usually you wouldn't recommend putting that bird back in so the other stuff part, right?
Right. So with small songbirds like canaries and finches, if you separate them, absolutely they are going to be calling to each other. It may be that you have to keep them physically separated because one is beating another one up, but calling to the rest of the flock helps them have a sense of having that social environment around them, which is important for their psychological health. What you wouldn't want to do is take that one finch and take it and put it somewhere where it cannot see or hear other birds. That would be really psychologically hard on a finch or a canary. They really are social birds that do much, much better with others. So if it can hear it, even if it can see it, as long as they can't physically get at each other. So depending on the bird, they can sing different songs for different meanings. So they may have a territorial song and a attracting mate song, and then well, the mates come, now I'm going to do a pair bonding song, a song that I sing just to my individual mate. We may or may not be able to tell the difference. And they can. We can use what are called sonograms, where we can record their calls and look at individual sounds and tell the difference between all these different songs, but we can't always tell by ear. Is there a training song? Generally, if you get a canary and you want a bird that can sing well, you go on YouTube, you find a video of a canary singing that you like the song of, and you play that for your bird to help them learn. Because you didn't say this in the comment, but I think you are aware, that was Laura, right? I think you're aware that birds are not always born able to sing the song successfully, and they do sometimes have to learn from the adults.
Oh, yeah.
There are exceptions, but most baby birds have to learn from the adults.
I just saw that because like when I was watching the video, a suggestion came up saying training song for canary. And I was like, oh, does that mean that like it's not able to sing and they're trying to get it to sing by using that video?
They're trying to get it to sing that song
Okay.
using that video. Yeah, because the innate song is not as complex and often is not as pleasing to the ear as the trained songs. Birds may or may not open their beak while singing. So this canary's got his beak open, but there are plenty of videos out there of birds with their beaks closed who are singing. When birds sing with a closed beak, the sounds are shifted to what's called a lower frequency. So it's kind of a deeper voice. These are usually used in territoriality and mating songs. It's a still poorly understood phenomenon. So we're not exactly sure why they do it. And some species will do both open beak songs and closed beak songs at different times. We're still just figuring this out. All canaries will sing, as Laura brought up just a second ago. They need training to sing the proper song. Not surprisingly, males sing more than females. So if you really want a singing canary, male is a better choice. You will probably get sick of hearing it, though. Let's be honest, because it will sing all the time. All right, so when we're talking canaries, Laura, how much are you selling that canary for? 150? Do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I will let you know.
When you're looking at show canaries, yes, these are show canaries. People breed them to have these strange feathers that curl, or this, I don't know, Three Stooges haircut looking thing, or bright red. This is a red factor canary. Depending on the breed of canary, if you're looking at a show quality canary, they start at a couple of $100 and go up to at least $1,000. And these can be singers or for physical appearance. Non-show canaries, not surprisingly, are cheaper. If you're buying direct from a breeder, you might be able to get them for between $50 and $100. Regardless, be careful when buying a pet bird. If you go to a breeder's, you want to be able to look at their facility. You want to be able to see how clean is it? How crowded are the birds? Do the birds look bright and alert? Or are they kind of sitting kind of hunched up, kind of like, little kids pouting? If they are molting, they're not going to look good. I would suggest if you go and a bunch of the birds are molting, you come back in a couple of weeks when they're through with molting. Look at the droppings. They can't keep their cages clean enough to never have droppings. So find some droppings and look at those. Droppings should have a white area. If it's fresh, there will be a wet patch that's clear. And then there will be a black or green area. So the white area is basically their equivalent of urine. And the brown or green area is the feces themselves. Spend some time looking at images on the internet, kind of get a feel for what you think the feces should look like in healthy birds. It's a great way to, looking at droppings is a great way to figure out if an animal is sick or not, because they may not show signs of illness, but if their droppings are really wet or a funny color, that's a good warning sign. If you want a great singer, or if you want a really good quality, show quality bird, find a bird show. Go to the bird show, look around. If you want a great singer, listen to the birds. And that's a good way to come to meet breeders who are breeding these show quality birds. And Laura, I'm about to talk about pet stores. Still want to be careful. Some are good, some are bad. The question comes up, what about the big box warehouse style pet stores? Petco, PetSmart, that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, there's definitely some misinformation out there about where their birds come from. And I worked to try, I have worked over the years trying to get through this misinformation and figure out what the truth is. And frankly, I just don't have a good answer for you. PETA, if you're not familiar with PETA, I love animals and I believe that animals should be well taken care of. I don't like PETA. I do not like them. They have expressed the idea that these big pet stores get their birds, their reptiles, their fish from basically the bird, reptile, and fish equivalent of puppy mills. We know PETA is not a reliable source of information. We know, yes, Heather, you've got a good point there. We know they put animals to sleep, that they've rescued. I don't know what their real agenda is, but based on what I've seen, they've gone to dog shows and poisoned dogs. I don't know how that helps the idea of we want animals to be treated better. So I don't trust them. There are other sources that say that even these big box stores will get from a variety of breeders, including local breeders, but they are definitely getting some of their animals from big breeding facilities. So KT, which is a brand of birdseed, bird food products, they have a breeding facility. I don't know what kind of quality the animals are kept in there. So I can't give you a good answer about whether pet stores are a good place to get birds or not. I would look at smaller pet stores, but again, you know, it's if you can't see where the animals are being bred, you don't know what conditions they're being kept in. Okay. Regardless, if birds are being, you can often tell by looking at animals that they're mistreated, but remember, if you're not familiar with them, if you're like not familiar with birds, first off, birds will hide evidence of illness. And they can often be on the verge of death before you can tell. Yeah.
I definitely, I mean, having worked in reptile care, I've then worked with rodents and reptiles. So I definitely, just like going to Petco or PetSmart, I can tell that 2 out of 3 of the main 3 things that they sell are very badly mistreated. So I can only assume that their birds are also mistreated, because those are also animals that hide their ailments. And if it's to the point where you can see it, like, because like, I mean, when I was at Jabberwock, we had a chameleon that was completely healthy until she dropped dead.
Yeah.
So it's just like, those are also very resilient animals that you cannot tell. So just assuming, and the only Petco and PetSmart that I really go to are the ones in Danvers and Peabody, and those ones definitely mistreat their animals, more so Petco. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know much about birds, but if you 2 out of 3, you can kind of assume.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I would do. I would look at the birds, because I'm better at looking at recognizing sick birds. The reptile is going to have to be really down before I could recognize it. So, but that's a good point. Look at what you know, get an idea.
Yeah, you see a lot of dehydration and hypovitaminosis A, which is a lack of vitamin A.
Yeah.
Which causes a lot of issues.
Doesn't that cause bone problems?
Metabolic bone disease is usually caused by a lack of UVB, but vitamin A can play a role in that. But usually hypovitaminosis A causes shiny skin, eye infections, and pore shedding.
Okay.
Which pore shedding can lead to loss of limbs and stuff like that. But metabolic bone disease can definitely be caused by it, but it's usually a lack of UVB.
Okay, thanks. All right. Regardless of where the animals come from, a breeding facility is going to keep animals in relatively close contact with others of their kind, which means they're more likely to be able to share diseases. And if we're talking about a large pet store, there's the stress of shipping. Even if we're talking a local pet store, the animals being taken from their home, transported, and put into a new environment. So animals from pet store, regardless of how good the breeder that they came from was, they are more likely to carry diseases or get sick from stress levels than going directly to a good local breeder. Now, finding a good local breeder, that's a whole nother difficulty right there. I wish I had an easy answer to you, but it's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so the other bird we are talking about are zebra finches. These are zebra finches. I love zebra finches. They're so cute, and they just cheerful little peepers. Wild zebra finches, this background image is wild zebra finches. They live in Australia, primarily in dry grassland type habitat. So the outback, little deserty kind of habitat, open forests, farm fields. They feed largely on grass seed, small insects like termites, but they also eat some green plant material. So they'll eat some leaves, they'll eat some flowers, they'll eat some fruit. So they eat a lot of different things, but it's a seed-based diet. These were originally domesticated in the early 1800s. So they've been domesticated for several hundred years now. These are domestic birds. So they look a lot like these wild birds. So we call this color wild type. So it looks similar to the wild type. The males have these orange cheeks and this reddish brown patches on the side and this black collar. This is a female. She does have the tears, but the rest of her is kind of plain. Lately, people have been breeding them for different color varieties. So these different color varieties may or may not have what's called sexual dimorphism. Anybody know what that term means?
That the males and females look different from each other.
Exactly. The males and females look different from each other. So this is a female. This is a male and a female. This one's a male. This one's a male. Generally speaking, the males are going to have more pattern on them. They are more likely to have a color patch on the cheek and some markings on the chest and these stripes under the wing that can be a slightly different color, might be speckled. I would not be surprised. I am not surprised to hear Heather chime in saying that they have trouble breeding. Whenever you're developing new color varieties or new breeds of an animal, in order to get the different color established firmly in a bunch of individuals, what you get is you get a lot of inbreeding. And so when you have inbreeding, you're more likely to have genetic diseases that cause infertility and diseases later in life. Yeah, Maddie.
Just coming from like a reptile point of view, that's very, very interesting. Because of how common morphs are in the hobby. Like I could go down to like even go to PetSmart, you can see it will say oh, what's the word? I can't remember the word, but it will say like multiple different types of the one type of snake. And I just think that's very interesting.
Assorted.
Because,
Assorted.
thank you. I just think that's very interesting because while reptiles do definitely have line bred traits, morphs are more common, and usually line breeding with reptiles, which is inbreeding, and usually it's the offspring to the parent, it usually doesn't really matter.
Really?
Yeah, because the parents have different parents. It as long as you're not continuously doing it, new bloodlines are obviously more like it's a plus, but like if you were to breed an offspring to the parent, it really wouldn't do much. And even breeding offspring to its sibling, it doesn't do that much. but it's usually offspring to parent. It doesn't do anything other than pass that trait along. And I found it very interesting that an animal that is, I mean, genetically they're obviously different, but they come from the same place. I find that I just find that very interesting.
Yes, yes. I would say that with birds and mammals, which I'm more familiar with, breeding siblings together once, that usually is okay. It's when you do it for generations after generations after generations, that's when you really start to see the problems showing up.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
in
no, I
reptiles
don't
that weirdly
disagree with
doesn't
you at all.
happen. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
I just said what she just said is highly accurate. You know, like if you keep doing it, you're gonna see like a higher percentage of problems appear. But
Yeah, that, I mean, definitely, I mean, you can just look at royal families and
Yeah.
but no, that strangely doesn't happen in reptiles because line bred traits usually do have to be generational. And I mean, you can just look at like specifically like red bull snakes. That is a line bred trait that is not a morph. It's not dominant recessive, it's just a line bred trait. But that usually means that they're all from the same bloodline.
Hang on a second. There's a question in the chat. I guess I'll just say it out loud. There's a question. Apparently, on a previous short answer, I asked about zebra finches. Yeah, that's why I changed the way I was doing the assignments, because I was guessing how much material we would get through, and we really often are not getting through that much material. So
I just knew that because the egg binding question. But,
so we're getting off on reptiles. My question, which you may not be able to answer, Maddie, is how many generations of snake with these different varieties, how many generations are we talking about?
So I just looked it up to make sure what I was saying was correct. And right here it says it seldom has negative consequences.
Okay.
And specifically my favorite breeder, Snake Discovery, it's very common for them to breed offspring to parent, like always, because like if they'll have like an older snake that passed away, as soon as the offspring is old enough, they'll because I mean females stop breeding before the males do. So if they have like a female offspring, they'll usually hold it back so that they can then breed it back to the father because it has the same genes. And I have no idea why it doesn't do anything. I don't know if it's because snakes in the wild are just like, they kind of like, a lot of snakes will end up in like these breeding huddles.
Yeah.
They don't really like, I guess they don't really know what they're doing and with who. I don't know if that's why. I'm not sure exactly why. I just know that it doesn't really have any consequences like it does with mammals.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Go get your PhD and study that. Come back to me in about 10 years and let me know.
I mean, I am, there is a possibility I do want to go on to be a herpetologist. Not 100% sure yet, but.
That's a good thesis topic there. Yeah, I really don't know. Okay. But this isn't herpetology class, no matter how much we get distracted by this. Okay, when we talk about these small songbirds, these canaries and finches, most of these species are very social. In fact, most of the birds we keep in captivity are very social species. Even the big parrots, the macaws, in the wild, they are extremely social. So when we're talking about canaries and finches, we can keep them in relatively, well, okay, not relatively compared to the wild, but we can keep them in larger numbers. In the wild, zebra finches They are breeding colonies, will have at least 100 members in their breeding colony. And when they flock outside of breeding season, we're talking 200, 300, or even up to 1,000 zebra finches. So that gives you an idea of how much interaction they normally get. In a cage, we can have problems with males fighting over females. We can have problems with females attacking males. If she is in season and she wants to mate, if the male doesn't want to mate, if there's no place for her to lay an egg, there can be battling between the male and female. If you are not interested in breeding, you should try and keep a single sex, either all males or all females. When I had the zebra finches before, I had the advantage that my rescued male only had one leg. So I had a female, and he would mount her and satisfy her, but he couldn't get positioned correctly, so he never successfully fertilized her eggs. That was really a nice advantage for me, since I ended up with a male and a female. Okay. We got sidetracked on reptiles again. So we're going to come back on Thursday. We'll talk about breeding, specifically looking at finches, but also canaries. And then we're really going to get into the internal anatomy of birds. Maddie, you don't have to say you're sorry. It was my fault. I kept asking you questions. All right. Any questions?
I have a question. Yeah. In addition to the genetic problems with infertility and such, are there problems trying to get these new colors or shapes in the species that are sexually dimorphic? Do they have to contend with the females just being like, I don't like the way you look?
Generally speaking, if you put a male and a female in a cage and she just doesn't have options, she'll go like, you may be ugly, but you're the only thing around.
Dang. Well, people are bad. I guess birds are too.
Yep. When you're really needing it, you know, they don't have electronics to help.
Well, I'm going to create that for them. Birdmatch.com.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So speaking of the project, I was going to do it. I was wondering if it's okay to do it on the conure.
The California conures?
Yeah. The more colorful one.
Oh, you're conure.
Yeah, conure. Yeah.
You need to pick a specific one.
Okay, cool. I will figure that out.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. If that's it, I will see everybody next time.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I wasn't sure if this mic works, but I was gonna ask for the project. Do we just have to ask you about it, or do we have to fill out that form that's on the Blackboard? That's the official request.
Blackboard is the easiest, but you can also send me an email or ask me right now.
I think I already emailed you about mine, but I was just wondering if I had to do that Blackboard thing too.
No, if we've already communicated against it, that's good enough.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.